Hey, good morning, Dan.
Morning, David. How's it going?
It's going great. And yourself?
I'm doing okay.
Cool.
Been busy.
Yeah, no, what you been working on?
Oh, infrastructure, trying to make people make stuff better.
Yeah, right.
That's
Yeah, same.
very broad.
Yeah, same. Actually started a HMI SCADA project this week, so it's going to be kind of fun, pretty limited, but it's a good start for what this client is trying to do. So looking forward to it. So yeah, so it doesn't look like you're participating in the No Shave November. I guess Matrix, we're doing mustaches this year, and I got to tell you, we're not even halfway through the month, and I'm ready to get rid of this thing. It's just it's not working for me.
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever really been able to grow a mustache. I know that's not saying much, but
yeah, no, I get it. I get it. Usually I'll, during like the holidays, I'll let it grow out full. I just won't shave everything, but hey, what do you do? So
sure.
well, hey, so what I want to do, chat with you about today is somebody asked me a little while back, what's the difference between what I'm going to call an Industry 3.0 controller and an Industry 4.0 controller? And there's quite a bit of difference there. So rather than just trying to put together a list or, describe it, I'll just shoot a video on it and actually show you what an Industry 4 controller, what some of the new things that come out, what they're capable of.
Very cool.
For this thing, we're going to be using an Opto22 Groove Epic for that. And of course, their marketing will tell you it's not a PLC, it's not a PAC, it's not an edge computer. It's an edge programmable industrial computer. And that's the Epic. That's what it stands for. And so that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. So go ahead and fire it off. When you first bring up when you first install one, the first thing you need to do is actually hit it with a web address. So this right away, it's something that's a little bit different. There's actually a web server that is on it, and you have to go in and create a username and password, and then you can log in and start using the account. And this is that landing page that you get. And so, of course, like, many of, since it's a controller, it does all the things like has some I/O to it. There is a programming or a development environment. We'll look at that here shortly. And then, of course, you can also there's some onboard displays as well. So this is where all the I/O gets set up, and you have a list of what's there, and you can go in and program all of those and set it up in terms of, what all your names are and that type of thing. And then, of course, that also does have an onboard visualization for developing some screens. That's called GroovView. So this is just a basic demo that I created for a client just to show them. And you can see that it's already starting to do some of the things you would expect within an HMI.
Oh, and that's just all on the controller.
It's all on the controller itself. So this is all there, and you can go in and edit it. There's all types of objects that come with it. They call them widgets. And then if you need some more, you can actually go to the Opto22 website, and you can download a whole ton of SVG files so that you can create some pretty dynamic graphics. And I do know they're working on trying to come up with more of now what they call the high performance graphics, because historically people like to have the wow factor with their displays, but now in terms of doing best practices, it's more of those high performance. We're using a lot of very muted, a lot of grayscale, maybe muted colors. That way you can call attention to anything that's going on inside that. So, and actually to do that programming, you use what they call their pack control. And instead of being able to do like ladder logic or structured text or function blocks, those types of things, they use something a little bit different with just some symbols. And so you have these various symbols up here where you can do an opto script. So you do have scripting, you do a condition block. So that's where, is this true? Is it false? Is there something there? You can also continue just to continue on with that. And of course, then there's the action block. So if it's true, what do you do? Most of the time, that's what you're going to be using, these blue and the green blocks. And even within that, you can decide, okay, is something true or not? You can now, is this timer done? And you can add multiple commands to it. So is it greater than this? And is it this? Have ors, those types of things. But then there's a whole pile of commands you can do. So, similar, you're going to see that there are all types of control or all conditions that you can check for. It's all the logic, it's all the timers, it's all the inputs and outputs and moves and charts and, all of the things that you would expect to find within a controller. And I mentioned you can do the you can do scripting on it as well. So let me find one here where instead of actually having to draw that out, you can just come in and start using something that looks, it's sort of Java-esque, C#-esque to come in and do some things to make that. It's their own. It's just called an Opto22. And all the variables that you had in the charts, you can use those as well. So this is how you can, come in and program it. In this particular program, this is actually the program that's running a demo that we're going to look at that's sitting within Opto22 itself. But you can also configure all your I/O right here as well. All the names and whether it's available to the public and those types of things. So, that's the visualization environment. So let's get into. Oh, go ahead.
Just a real quick. I know that getting something set up in the past with a controller, you had to have specialized software to first talk to the controller. If you go way back, you maybe had a specialized programming cable. Clearly, this is far and beyond that. The fact that you're just doing a lot of this visually through a web page directly on the controller is, clearly leaps and bounds ahead. But if I'm not mistaken, I know I did do a little bit of research ahead of time. This Groove Epic, it has a screen on it. Can you do your initial configuration, like your IP address and all that stuff from there, and literally after that you're just hitting a web page? Is that the whole deal?
Yeah, absolutely. So under the network, and I was going to show you this a little bit later, you can configure all of the IP addresses of what it is that's on your local controller. So there's actually 2 Ethernet ports. Again, this is one of the differences, is that there's one that's going to be on your control LAN and the other that's going to be on your business LAN. So right now I'm using the same underlying subnet for everything, but this is just showing you that you can set those up. So now you can isolate the control that goes on with the Epic itself. So, but you have 2 Ethernet connections. There is a Wi-Fi capability with using just a little USB adapter for it. And then it also has an open VPN tunnel. So you can, right from the controller itself, you can use OpenVPN to connect to a controller. So now you'll be able to access it, remotely. That's built in. So instead of having to use an aftermarket, E1, Tazi even an IO hub, they all have VPNs functionality built on them. You can do a VPN access right from the controller itself.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's where it all gets configured. So great question. It was actually what we were going to talk about next. And then, of course, whenever you realize, well, wait a second, if I can open up ports and expose it, what kind of security exists on the Epic controller? And, well, that's a great question. So on the controller itself, you do have, there's a server-side certificate that you can use. It does come with one, or you can set up your own, use a fully qualified domain name. You can also set up client SSL. So this would be a certificate that you create for all of your clients to use so that they can access what it is you're doing. And then, of course, there's a firewall. What can you access from the various ports? So these are all the services that exist within the Opto, and you can add in all kinds of rules for it, but you can decide on which of those network connections are you able to actually access things. So can I access Modbus from both of those? And right now it's only on one of the, on Ethernet 1. That's the business LAN, not on your network side. But you can go in and do all that. And of course, you can sign out all users.
One thing that I just have to say as a security guy, looking at that, it's nice that it enumerates all those different services, visually right away. Meaning that, if you're trying to secure, I don't know, Windows box or pretty much anything else, especially at a network layer, you have to kind of come up with that list yourself and then decide what's allowed and what's not. Here, we already know what's exposable on the controller, and then it's just a matter of who are we exposing it to.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's really nice.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought us back, because I realized I misspoke earlier. It's the business side that's got the Modbus TCP access. It's the external side to it that you cannot access with it. And of course, the tunnel is as well, because you have to have a VPN connection in order to get there. So an account. So I mentioned earlier, when you first come in, you have to set up an account. So there are users that you come in, and there's some different user levels that I have. So of course, this is me. There's an operator, there's a NodeRed API. So there's local users that have permissions and what goes along with that. So those are created. So not only can you secure what people can access, you can now put out permissions as far as what are the applications that they can access. So even if I'm able to get in, what are some of the things that I can do with it? And you can create local users for it. You can also use an LDAP server. So if you want to use a Microsoft Active Directory, you could make a connection to that or any other LDAP server that you have, that instead of me creating local users, I can now have those federated across my enterprise, so that a common application is that, well, holy cow, if we have an operator that, you're at a remote asset and you have 100 of these things, you're going to have to go around to every one of those and disconnect that user. Well, if you're using the Active Directory, you just suspend that person's account, and no longer do they have access across any one of the epics that you have that's deployed throughout your enterprise.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And a lot of the clients that I deal with, as we're doing significant upgrades to infrastructure that may have been in place for a long time, that's one of the big asks from a control systems perspective, is doing Active Directory integration, which is with as much of equipment as possible. And you can do some of it, but to have that connection directly on the controller itself, it really gets it to as close as you possibly can in terms of access to a device, and then to have it all, still managed under the single pane of glass that is Microsoft Active Directory. That's really nice.
Yeah, and all the same types of permissions and all the like fit within there as well. So next thing that it comes with, and this is becoming more common on a lot of industrial controllers, is the ability to do MQTT. So that's your message queuing telemetry transport. So it supports it right out of the box. You have the ability to support both the what we call flat MQTT, or MQTT with string payloads. And you can also use Sparkplug. And what Sparkplug is, it's just a standard that tells all of the other equipment. It normalizes some data. The power of MQTT is that you can publish to any topic. The drawback to MQTT is that you can publish to any topic. So this puts a little bit of some rules and configuration on, what is my device? This is the payload. This is what you can expect, so that I can actually use the Sparkplug B to do control. I can actuate and turn things on and off using that Sparkplug payload. And the reason why I like MQTT from a security standpoint is that it only exposes, it only uses an outbound port, so I don't have to expose an inbound port to the device itself in order to get some of that control data passing back and forth. So that's really one of the power of, or some of the power of using MQTT. And of course, part of that Sparkplug is you do have a group ID and a node ID. You can see this is for a demo that I was doing with a company called Ectobox. So shout out to Kevin Jones there. And then in terms of what you're actually publishing, is that right from the device itself. So you remember how we set up the I/O? So I can set up my I/O and then start publishing that out to a broker right away. So if you want to you need an edge device where I just need to get some data out, and you want to use it as an edge gateway, but you need some additional functionality with it, you can literally just go in, physically tie into your I/O, and you can publish those out right away. You don't have to do anything else. That's ready to go. Or you can also use, so this is now what's called a controller, is the device type. And the controller is going to be using either a code-assist project, or it's going to be using a pack strategy out here. So within the pack control, they actually have what's called a strategy. That's the overall, instead of like an application that you write in traditional PLCs, they call it a strategy. And then you have these different charts. So these are some different, think of it in terms of like a different ladder or a different rung on it as well. So you can roll that as well. Or you can also add a device. I mentioned you can do both a controller. You can also do the Opto MMP. It looks like I don't have the code assist on here right away, but it does have that ability to do it as well. So that's the MQTT functionality that comes out of it. So now we're going to get pretty wild. You probably noticed that there's an ignition button here. You can actually.
Is there anything it can't do?
Right? Yeah. Right. So come with the standard product. It actually has both full ignition and ignition edge that is you can deploy on it. And so now you can take advantage of all the ignition edge capabilities and connect in with. So again, if you're going out to say a brownfield where you have some legacy, again, I'll call them some industry 3.0 controllers, and you want to access those and bring them all in together, you can use ignition edge or full-blown ignition to do that. So in lieu of using the GroovView, you can run ignition right on the device itself.
Wow. And
you can see that it launches, goes right to it. And I hate doing things live because you never know what's going to happen when you click the button. But you can see now it brought that up. Now you have the ignition edge development environment, and you can now start working with the Opto 22 or the Groov Epic, and you can start working with any other PLC out there itself.
And I guess just to rehash kind of what you said, then ignition edge is basically functionally an edge gateway for legacy protocols that then translates into MQTT as it publishes upstream. Is that right?
Yeah, it can. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an edge. There's several flavors of it. It really gives you it's an edge HMI. So you can do some screen development and that type of thing in it. But like I said, it's an ignition edge instance. It's running right on the device itself. I will say if you do want to run the full-blown ignition, there are two different processors you can get. One of them's PR1. That's the one I have, and then there's maybe not quite a year ago the PR2 was launched, and that has a much more powerful processor on it, and has a lot more RAM, a lot more storage capability on it as well. Yeah, so that's there. And even though it's a feature that has, that people talk a lot about, NodeRed is really, to me, what sets it apart as far as what can you do with an Industry 4 controller. So I've already launched my NodeRed instance. So when you get into NodeRed, and this is just I'm going to call it the standard commercial off the shelf. So this is the NodeRed you could download as an application on any kind of Linux distro. You can run that right here on it. And Opto has a whole palette, as that they call it, that includes all of the ability to access the remote I/O. So this particular flow that I'm showing you here, I'm using a program called Upkeep, and what I'm doing is I'm actually generating a work order from my edge device itself. I could even do this same thing with the GroovView, is that I'm now looking for a state that tells me that I need to take an action. So I can monitor, I have a pressure switch that's here, and in this particular application, I was simulating a compressor that had an after filter that needed a pressure, or that needed to be changed because the pressure switch had tripped. So I can actually generate that work order and send a payload right into my CMMS application, which is Upkeep, and the person that is responsible for changing the filter, that person can then go around and actually has a project created right for them. So sometimes you'll have your utilities area at a plant that sits remotely. Instead of having to send a guy in a truck way out there, you can now start creating some flows around these types of applications. Or if there's some other alarm event, or really anything that would cause somebody to have to do something, you can actually trigger that right from NodeRed itself.
Excellent. I mean, that's part of the whole edge-driven philosophy, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It tells it knows the information it has, and it's going to send it out to you in a way that can now be consumed. And we never want to make assumptions on how data is going to be consumed, so we want to get as much out there as we can. But then there's also instances where we know we're going to want to consume this data in a certain way, and it gives you the flexibility of doing that. Sure. So lastly, we talked a little bit about the ability to set up a tunnel connection, so a layer 3 connection. And you can see right now I'm connected on a VPN that is running on an Epic that's sitting out in the plant in Temecula, California. So this is talking right to it. So I've made a connection. It's just as easy as downloading a profile and turning it on. And now I can actually access the Groov epic that's sitting out at Opto 22. And so right away, you can see that I'm limited on what it is that I can do. So I can now access GroovView. And so I can come and you can see many of the applications that you can run on here. You also have the ability to, is anybody connected via an SSH? So I don't know if I mentioned earlier, there's a whole Linux distro that's running under the hood that I can access, and I can start just writing some programs to interface with it, or I can run some services. I could put on a MariaDB, where I could actually use on board. I could actually start writing to, say, some SQL tables. Now, again, it's limited to how much you can do, but that's out. That's available to you out there. This is the power monitoring. This is a new IO card that they're going to be releasing soon, so I can actually do power. So it can do three-phase power. So it has both the three-phase voltage as well as the current that's running through, and I can now infer power from that. So that's one of the new cards that's coming out. I believe this is the overall system. So this is telling us what's going on, how much processor speed are we using. You can see it's not using a lot to run everything that's on there. This is a turbine. So actually, if the camera were live, you could actually go in and see there's an actual turbine that's running right now. And so there's actually a NodeRed flow, and we'll look at it here shortly, that is controlling this. And so what's supposed to happen is that if a certain rate of a stock goes above an amount, it can actually turn the fan on and get that going. And so from the application we're trying to show is that there's, if you're in a production environment for oil and gas, and you only want to run that particular site when the spot price of crude is at a certain point, you can actually monitor that and have that automatically done, so you don't have to send somebody out there to do it. And of course, there's also some weather monitoring, so you can come in and enter some latitude, longitude, and also on that same demo, I can now turn on a weather, or there's a light stack that they have there. That's, if you're familiar with the weather beacon, it's green if it's the same, no change in temperature. It's I think it's white if it's going to be a colder, or it's red if it's going to be warmer. And that can all be done on here, and it's fed from NodeRed. So let's take a look at how that actually works. So this is what's actually driving all that, is that we just, every 1 second and every 15 minutes, we look to see, did somebody put in a new station? I'm now going to monitor where I'm located, here in McWanago, Wisconsin. Right now it's just set to Los Angeles. So it's going to look to see, is that been updated? And then every 15 minutes, it's going to go out and read the station and see what's going on. So that's one of them. That's a flow that's created. Getting the spot price. So once again, I can go out and make an API call, find out the spot price of something. If it's below or above a certain amount, I'm going to turn it on. I can also, when somebody turns on that turbine, I can also get a notification. So you can see Benson Hoagland. If this gets turned on, he'll actually get a text, or the same way with Garrett Reichert, he'll get a text when those types of things happen. I can take data and I can publish it right to Amazon Web Services. I can go right into an IBM Watson. I can also do some port forwarding here. So this is where we're starting to get, into some pretty nutty applications, and so on and so forth. Why I really like using NodeRed is that, well, gee golly whiz, I would have to go through and now set all these up on every epic that I want to put out there, and that's actually not the case. I can come in here and I can actually export all of the flows, or just a single flow, and I can actually apply those over. So we're going to go ahead and cancel that. So I can now come back over to my NodeRed instance, and I can just come in and hit import. I can select the file, and I did this earlier. I can hit open, import. I can actually decide, do I want that entire stack or not? I just hit import selected, and it tells you exactly what it is that I configured. And so now all of the those nodes that were on, or all the flows that were created on that other machine, I now have access to. Now, one caveat to that is I will have to go in and change the an API. So back here under users, it's a little pro tip for you here. So under me, there's an API key that I need in order to access the Opto 22 data that sits on my controller. So I will have to go in and update some of these. But now you can see very quickly I'm able to deploy NodeRed across the entire enterprise. So I'm not actually going to bring these in, so I'm going to close out of here so that it doesn't import them. But you can see right away just how powerful the overall Epic controller is and all the things that it'll do. It still does all the same control that a traditional controller does, but it gives you the capability of solving some pretty amazing problems. So
Sure.
what do you think? Questions, comments?
Oh, the gears are turning.
Right?
You know, in terms of the types of varied information that you can pull in to make decisions, you know, it no longer is that data restricted to stuff that the PLC can natively gather from what you can consider traditional I/O. You know, sources far and beyond from the controller, from market fluctuations to the weather. You know, that broadens the scope significantly.
Yeah, and this just reminded me there is a NodeRed dashboard. So one of the palettes you can actually use is a NodeRed dashboard. So now we can see building power. I can take that same information and now publish it out to just a dashboard instance within NodeRed as well. So if people don't have access to the, you know, right there locally, you can visualize some things over a NodeRed as well. And there's a lot of, you know, there's a PID loop that you can build in as well. So all kinds of fun stuff.
Just I'm trying to think, I guess, if I get maybe one of the classical maybe concerns that you'd hear from people as you're trying to put something like this in, and I think I know the answer, but is, you know, you've got a controller that may be potentially reaching beyond the boundaries that you've traditionally seen controllers reach beyond. I realize that the controller is very, very flexible in terms of what it you let it reach to, but for those that would say, "Oh, I've still got an environment that isn't fully exposed," you know, we could still consume data from just about anywhere that it is exposed. Is that right? I mean, if for instance they've got weather data published internally within their business, we can consume it from there as well. It doesn't really matter where we're reaching out to, right?
Yeah, it'll consume the data wherever you need it from, and that's the thing. And usually the objection is, well, we don't want to do all those things. You know, we're concerned about, you know, this, that, or the other thing. You know, which is fine. At its core, it's still a very powerful controller that is less expensive than some of the other premium controllers that are on the market. So you don't have to just limit yourself to the fact of, well, I don't need all that stuff, so I'm just going to continue on with what I have. It's a very powerful controller on its own, but when you're ready to do something in the future, now you're not locked into, oh great, you know, that we just invested in controllers 2 years ago and now we're going to have to come back and change because we have the need. So this gives you sort of future proofing what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the biggest thing that I saw too with it, is that it does offer flexibility because you know, if you're pointing it to one data source one day and then that data source moves, or it, you know, either locally wherever the PLC is, or you've aggregated it somewhere else within a larger topology, or eventually if you get comfortable with grabbing certain bits of data from the cloud or from the internet or any of those other places, this has the capability to handle it wherever the data is being generated or made available, I should say.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Very cool.
So anyway, that's what I wanted to show you. That this is really the fundamental differences. There's a lot of differences. It just has, like I said earlier, it has the capabilities of solving a lot of problems that you weren't able to do in the past. So,
I mean, a lot of differences. I don't think maybe it doesn't even do it justice. It's a difference between an electric car and the Model T.
Or a black and white and color, you know, television. I mean, there's just some it's revolutionary and game changing, or you know, even just television in general, how it was. So, all All right, well, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking
Yeah.
the time today, Dan. I appreciate it, and I look forward to talking with you soon.
Sounds great.
All right, take care.
Yep, you too.